Late afternoon sunbeams stretched across the horizon, painting the sea with streaks of molten gold. The beach buzzed with the usual clamor of children building castles from damp sand, families flying kites in the steady breeze, and groups of friends gathered around portable speakers. A brisk wind rustled the beach towels sprawled across the dunes. Nina sat alone on a rainbow strip towel, her toes digging into the warm, grainy sand as her heart thudded with a quiet apprehension. For as long as she could remember, the ocean had both enticed and intimidated her. Its vastness, its unbridled power, it was a force she admired from a distance, but every time Nina tried to conquer her hesitation and step further than ankle deep, her mind buzzed with cautionary alarms. She tried to distract herself with a paperback novel, hoping that perhaps this small distraction would quiet her nerves, but the rhythmic thunder of waves colliding with the shore kept pulling her attention back toward the water. She caught sight of surfers slicing through the surf, their silhouettes bending and balancing against the push of the ocean's current. They made it look so graceful, so natural, like they belonged to a different world. A pang of envy rippled through her. She wanted to be part of that excitement, to feel the salt spray against her cheeks in a triumph of fearlessness. As if on cue, the wind gusted, carrying with it the sharp tang of salt that seemed to beckon her beyond the shore. For a moment, Nina wrestled with the memory of a childhood mishap. She had once flailed in an ill-fitting life jacket during a family lake trip, panic climbing her throat like a vine. While her relatives had pulled her to safety, the memory of helplessly swallowing water and thrashing against an unrelenting current had remained, rooted in her psyche. She shut the paperback and stared at the horizon. A fleck of courage stirred. Slowly, she eased off the towel, headed to the water's edge, and let the cool spray lash at her calves. The sea was as moody as it was beautiful, yet a small flicker of determination lit inside her. Today, she told herself, maybe she'd wade just a bit deeper. A few yards away, Jonah paddled on his longboard, searching for the perfect wave. The sun highlighted streaks of gold in his salt-stiffened hair. A regular at these waters, Jonah had grown up on the beach, and riding the waves was an instinct as natural as walking. He recognized the subtle changes in tide, studied the breaks along the coastline, and had an almost uncanny intuition for the whims of the ocean. As he hovered in the foaming brine, he glanced around, spotting other surfers positioned on their boards. They nodded to him in a friendly greeting, as many of them had known him since he was a child. Yet Jonah's focus extended beyond just the waves that day. He scanned the shore and noticed, as he often did, newcomers who ventured with hope or hesitation. There was a certain tenderness in his heart for those who came to the seaside, thirsting for something they couldn't quite name. He spotted one figure in particular, someone who hovered near the shallows, shoulders tense, posture rigid. Although the person's face was hidden behind loose wisps of dark hair, Jonah recognized the hallmark of fear. It was a stance he'd seen before, a tentative posture that longed for closeness with the sea but froze at the threshold. His gaze lingered for a moment, not out of pity but out of a gentle curiosity. Drawing a slow breath, Jonah refocused on the water. A swell started to rise, and he paddled in swift, powerful strokes. The wave gathered momentum, lifting him as he popped into a standing position. He pivoted gracefully, balancing as though guided by instinct alone. With the wave's crest foam-laced behind him, Jonah rode it until it fizzled into a gentle roll near the shore. As he hopped off into waist-deep water, a playful grin curved across his lips. He was about to head back out when the figure he had noticed earlier found its way into the corner of his vision. The person stood chest-deep now, hesitant yet determined, a push and pull happening in every shift of body and mind. Nina had mustered enough nerve to wade deeper than usual. The water was cooler around her torso. Each gentle wave that crashed against her startled her heart into a gallop. But she clenched her jaw, reminding herself to breathe. "You can do this," she whispered, inhaling the salted air. Her arms moved in small arcs against the surface, half trying to practice a freestyle stroke. It felt awkward. The heaviness of water resistance tested her shy confidence. She forced herself not to look back toward the shore. Instead, she focused on the open expanse in front of her, determined to master even the smallest shift of progress. A sudden wave, larger and more insistent than the others, swept past. She lost her footing on the sandy bottom, hooking her foot in a swirl of swirling foam. Panicked, she tried to right herself, but the next wave bowled into her with an unkind ferocity. She disappeared beneath a swirl of water, and fear exploded in her chest. The open salt water roared in her ears as she struggled to surface, her mind flicking through images of that childhood fiasco. Her limbs thrashed, but her sense of direction faltered. Bubbles, darkness, and the unwelcome sting of salt water snared her. She felt a hand clasp her upper arm, a solid grip, unwavering and firm. Through the swirling chaos, Nina was hauled back toward the surface. She had barely caught a lungful of air when a voice broke through the noise. "I've got you." The individual's grip guided her, supporting her weight as they fought another oncoming wave. Nina coughed and sputtered, her body shaking like a leaf. She blinked through blurry eyes to see a broad-shouldered figure, blonde hair plastered to his forehead by the tide, gentle yet commanding in his energy. He curved an arm around her and ushered her out of the deeper water until she could find footing again. When they reached waist-deep water, Jonah angled himself protectively between Nina and the oncoming swells so she could catch her breath. Her face was a portrait of mingled relief and alarm. She was gasping, lips slightly parted as she rasped desperately for air. "Are you all right?" Jonah asked, concern shaping every syllable. His voice was warm, calm, a steady anchor in the lingering turmoil of crashing waves. Nina coughed once more and managed a weak nod. I think so," she stammered, forcing a smile that betrayed the thunder of her pulse. The ache in her chest was far more mental than physical. A quiver of old fears awakened. But despite the ocean's ferocity, she felt an inexplicable sense of safety beneath Jonah's watchful presence. "You're trembling," he said softly, brushing salt water from his eyes. "Let's move a bit closer to shore, okay?" She nodded again, grateful for the suggestion, and they guided each other through the smaller breakers. Only after she felt the wet sand beneath her toes did Nina realize her heart was still hammered by aftershocks of panic. Jonah stepped aside to pick up his board, which had washed to the shore a few feet away. "Thank you," Nina said, voice that of a whisper but sincere. "You didn't have to help me," he offered her a kind-hearted grin. "It's no trouble. I'm Jonah. Looked like you ran into some trouble out there." He said it with no judgment, merely recognition. Nina tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear and gazed at him with shy gratitude. "I'm Nina. I just lost my footing. Thank you for pulling me out." The corners of her lips curved upward slightly. For the first time all day, she felt more curious than afraid. Jonah walked with Nina to her towel, his surfboard tucked under one arm. Dripping water cast tiny, glimmering drops on the sand. The sun was inching lower in the sky, painting the beach in softer pastel hues. Nina could see a gentleness in Jonah's gaze, mingled with a hint of admiration for her bravery. Once she was settled on her towel, she sighed, pressing her hands onto her chest to steady the erratic pace of her heart. Jonah sank onto the sand beside her, unbothered by the scratchy grains clinging to his still wet board shorts. "I've been in those shoes before," Jonah admitted after a moment's pause. "Struggling with control and feeling the water take charge, it can be overwhelming. If you're not used to it, the ocean can be a little scary." His tone held no criticism, only understanding. Nina studied his face, surprised. She couldn't imagine Jonah, a confident surfer who danced across the waves with seamless grace, ever feeling anything less than at home in the water. "You have?" she asked, brows knitting together with disbelief. He nodded. "I nearly gave up surfing the first time I wiped out badly, took in gulps of water, had my breath knocked out of me. After that, I hesitated every time I saw a big swell. But I learned new techniques, found teachers, gained confidence, and realized that a healthy respect for the ocean's power is part of the process." His gaze drifted seaward, absorbing the rhythmic crash of the surf, as if in silent reverence for that force that had once scared him too. Nina exhaled, her shoulders easing. I've struggled with fear for a while now, she confessed. Since I was a kid, actually. But I guess I keep coming here because I want to overcome it. I want to be like people like you, able to ride the waves, to be at peace in the water. Jonah's lips tug into a half smile. Well, if you want some help, I'd be happy to show you a few tricks. Sometimes it just takes a patient guide to make all the difference. Their first informal lesson began at sunrise the next morning amid beachgoers who trickled in to set up umbrellas or take brisk walks along the shore. Nina's nerves buzzed. She had hardly slept in anticipation, but the golden glow of dawn and Jonah's easygoing warmth soothed her. Together they stood near the water's edge, Jonah's surfboard planted upright in the sand. Well, a big part of getting over fear is understanding the ocean's patterns, he explained. We start by reading the tide. Notice how that wave breaks to the right, creating a channel on the left. Nina looked more carefully, noticing subtle variations in the water's surface. That channel can be friend or foe, Jonah continued. If you get caught in a riptide, it'll drag you out. But if you know how to ride it, it can also help you paddle past the break. They moved on to practicing breath control and simple strokes in the shallows. Nina's nerves occasionally flared, especially when a larger wave rolled in, but Jonah stood close, calmly demonstrating how to angle her body and duck under the swell. His presence felt like a safety net, unwavering, constant. Every time she managed to submerge herself and resurface, a small victory spark lit in her chest. Jonah grinned widely each time he saw her confidence bloom, even if only incrementally. As the morning stretched into midday, Nina's muscles ached from the new exertion, but she also noticed a sense of fulfillment. They paused to share a light snack of fruit and water, sitting side by side on the sand. The conversation meandered from their shared love of nature to childhood memories. Jonah mentioned that he had spent years traveling along various coastlines, chasing storms and legends of the perfect wave. Nina realized that beneath his bold exterior lay a thoughtful soul, one who found spiritual connection in the simple act of floating on water. Over the following days, they met regularly. Each session started in shallow water, focusing on fundamentals, how to control breathing, maintain buoyancy, angle one's body so the incoming wave seemed less threatening. Slowly, Jonah introduced her to his board, letting her lie on top of it while he steadied her from the side. At first, Nina's heart did a lurch every time a wave lifted them, but Jonah's calm instructions gently guided her. Feel how the wave cradles you. Don't fight it. Work with it. Go along for the ride. Nina discovered a flicker of adventurous spirit hidden under layers of old fears. In the hush of an early morning or the shimmering blaze of a late afternoon, she grew more comfortable letting the ocean's momentum guide her. She splashed laughingly when Jonah teased her by giving the board a light push and cheering at her attempts to maintain balance. Sometimes the board would slip, leading to a comedic tumble, but even then she felt no embarrassment, only a shared delight in learning. Their companionship flourished in tandem with Nina's skill. A playful banter often overshadowed any awkwardness. More than once, Nina found herself unexpectedly smiling when Jonah flashed her one of his carefree grins, encouraging her to try again. The swirl of salty air, warm sun, and gentle breezes magnified the sense of closeness between them. Nighttime would arrive too soon, and Nina would drift to sleep with her thoughts brimming with recollections of Jonah's kindness, his unwavering presence, and the exhilarating hum of the sea. One balmy afternoon, Nina reached a point where she wanted to push her training to the next level. Her progress had spanned from barely entering chest-high water to learning how to tread effectively in deeper waters. She felt proud of that growth, but a part of her still hesitated. She recognized, however, that if she was going to fully overcome her limitations, she needed to face the waves further out, where Jonah typically surfed. And she expressed her intentions to Jonah. He smiled in heartfelt approval. The surf's supposed to be moderate tomorrow morning. Let's go out there together, and I'll stay by your side. Early the next day, they waded out, The sky was layered with wispy clouds, and a gentle offshore breeze rolled across them, peeling back small waves in uniform sets. Jonah had strapped a life vest onto Nina, ensuring she felt comfortable. He also towed a smaller beginner's surfboard that he had borrowed for her. The plan was to get her acquainted with riding a small wave, nothing too dramatic, just enough to let her feel the rush of gliding freedom beneath her feet. An hour passed, and Nina's heart pounded from both effort and anticipation. On Jonah's signal, she got into position on the board while he steadied the tail. A modest wave surged behind them, and Jonah gave the board a gentle push. "Paddle!" he called out. Nina's arms moved in harried strokes, but her focus was razor sharp. As she felt the lift of the wave, she recalled everything Jonah had taught her about centering her weight, popping up quickly, and letting natural balance take over. She stumbled at first, tumbling off with a splash, yet as she surfaced and spat out a salty mouthful, laughter bubbled from her chest. It wasn't humiliation she felt, only an infectious sense of possibility. Jonah's grin gleamed in the sunlight. "Try again," he encouraged, voice warm and confident. And she did, several times in fact, falling, splashing, resurging. Her arms grew tired, but her spirit soared. Eventually, she found herself briefly standing, knees bent, arms outstretched, the wave carrying her forward in an exhilarating moment of triumph. Maybe it lasted only seconds, but to Nina it felt like an eternity of glorious freedom. She had never been so aware of her body, of the world around her, or of the intangible sense of pride blossoming in her chest. A few weeks later, the beach glimmered under the bright haze of midday sun. Nina and Jonah had fallen into a comfortable routine, meeting, practicing, sometimes sharing a meal of fish tacos at a local shack, then returning to the water. Their conversations flowed as easily as the tides, and Nina felt a connection stirring that went beyond simple friendship or coaching. She admired his patience and positivity. In turn, Jonah admired her willingness to confront her deepest fears. They teased each other about little quirks, Nina's obsession with reading historical novels, and Jonah's habit of scribbling wave sketches in a pocket notebook. Their banter veiled a deeper current. Often she'd catch Jonah's thoughtful stare tracing her features in the gilded light of late afternoon, or she'd find herself smiling at the memory of his laughter, rerunning it in her mind hours after she had gone home. An unspoken pull tethered them, like the undertow that shapes the coastline's subtle curves. They were conscious of it whenever their shoulders brushed in the shallows or when their knees touched while sharing a bench at the taco stand. Yet neither pressed forward with rushed declarations. The metamorphosis from teacher and student to something more was quietly, gradually unfurling. By now, Nina had advanced enough that they dared more challenging swells. She reveled in small accomplishments, noticing her posture on the board improved, and her fear gave way to an almost giddy excitement as she coasted on gentle afternoon waves. Sometimes she still felt the tug of anxiety loom, whispering reminders of the undertow or the unpredictability of rogue waves. But Jonah was always there, offering that reassuring grin, coaxing her forward with unwavering support. She often thought about how odd it felt. This sense of liberation came not only from facing the water, but also from trusting another person so implicitly. On a day that dawned calmer than usual, with tides measured yet persistent, Nina and Jonah ventured out deeper, farther than Nina had ever dared to go. The wind was mild, the sky a near perfect shade of azure, dotted by a few lazy clouds. They floated side by side, Jonah on his board, Nina on hers, scanning the horizon for a wave that matched Nina's budding confidence. Eventually, they spotted a gentle swell rolling in from the distance. Jonah nodded toward it, and Nina acknowledged him with a determined smile. She paddled into position, mindful of the timing Jonah had taught her. As the wave rose beneath her board, she popped up with newfound stability. This time, she maintained her stance, riding forward in a graceful line. The spray of the wave frothed around her ankles, and the sunlight sparkled on the surface as though applauding her better form. She managed an exhilarating run before jumping free of the board into waist-deep water. Laughter lit her face. She turned and saw Jonah coasting behind her, whooping in proud excitement. "Well done!" he exclaimed as he guided his board toward her. "You're natural at this." Her cheeks flushed from more than just the sun. The euphoria of riding that wave and Jonah's praise fueled a surge of gratitude inside her. Suddenly, words she hadn't planned spilled from her lips. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. I feel like you've helped me see past my fears, not just in the ocean, but everywhere." He hopped off his board and approached, eyes gleaming. Droplets of salt water trailed down his tanned arms. "You've found this courage within yourself, Nina. I was just here to remind you of it." A hush fell between them. The coastline's chatter receded, and for a moment they were adrift in each other's presence. The world distilled into a swirl of warm air, salt water, and unspoken tenderness. Nina found her gaze locked on Jonah's. Tiny flecks of gold in his eyes shimmered in the sun. Without warning, an undercurrent of emotion tugged at her heart. She remembered that first day, nearly drowning in a surge of panic, rescued by him. Now she was standing on her own 2 feet, buoyed by a sense of accomplishment and something infinitely more profound. She took one small step closer, the water lapping at her thighs. Jonah mirrored her movement almost reflexively, his expression tender. "I'm serious," Nina said softly. "I've tried so many times in my life to push past my limits, but I kept failing. And then I guess I just want to say thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," Jonah murmured. "Trust me, seeing you out here, seeing that joy in your eyes, that's more rewarding than you know." His voice caught slightly on the last syllable, suggesting a deeper subtext that made Nina's cheeks flush. Overcome with gratitude and propelled by a quickening desire, she rose to her tiptoes and pressed a gentle kiss against his lips. It was a swift union, as delicate as the warm breeze that ghosted over the surface of the water. Her heart hammered. For a heartbeat, she worried that maybe she had overstepped, but Jonah's hands rested lightly on her waist, returning her kiss with a soft, reassuring embrace before they stepped back. Their surfboards bobbed aimlessly a few feet away, drifting with the tide. In that kiss, the ocean seemed to hush, waves rolling gently on either side as though granting them a moment of stillness. Their eyes met in a mutual understanding that what they shared wasn't just a fleeting crush. Their experiences, the rescue, the lessons, the daily companionship had braided their spirits. They had built trust out of vulnerability, blueprinting a bond that felt solid as the incoming tide. The sun was beginning its gradual descent, gilding the sky in peach and lavender streaks. Nina and Jonah both felt a renewed sense of harmony as they made their way back to shore. They came onto the beach flush with excitement, water sluicing off their bodies in rivulets. There was a hush in the air, that particular hush that happens when day transitions into evening, a subdued energy that flanked them with possibility. They carried their boards up past the tide line and settled in the fine sand, turning to watch the final crest of the sun sink into the horizon. Jonah draped a towel around Nina's shoulders, and she chuckled when he wrung out a section of her hair, the salt water dripping onto the sand. As dusk spread across the sky, she leaned against him, letting her head come to rest on his shoulder. There was no hurried scramble for conversation. Comfort emerged in the quietness between them. After several moments, Jonah spoke, voice a gentle rumble. "You've come such a long way, Nina. I hope you can feel how far you've traveled from that day. Your fear seems smaller now, overshadowed by the spark in your eyes whenever you catch a wave." She curled her toes into the sand, reflecting on how differently she felt. "I'm still in awe of it all," she admitted. "I used to see the ocean as this overwhelming threat, but now I see it as something that can teach me, challenge me, but also empower me. And maybe I was missing that perspective in other parts of my life too, fearing failure, stagnating. but with your help, I feel like I can take on more. Jonah turned his head so his cheek pressed into her hair. I get it, he murmured. Sometimes a connection with the water can shine light on other things in our lives. It's humbling, but it also reminds us that we're capable of riding out challenges, no matter how rough the wave. She smiled softly and turned to him, eyes softly reflecting the pinkish orange sky. That's how I feel about you too, Nina whispered, like you're a reminder that I can adapt and grow, that I can be brave. Her hand found his, fingers twisting together in a delicate clasp. They sat there until the sky deepened to navy and the stars began dotting the wide expanse above. The last surfers had emerged from the water, and the beach gradually emptied, leaving just the whisper of waves upon the sand. There was so much unsaid, yet also nothing left to say. In the gentle circle of Jonah's arm around her, Nina felt safe, hopeful, and quietly triumphant. In the days that followed, their routine persisted, though it shifted in subtle, satisfying ways. They still practiced in the surf, but they also took walks along the beach at twilight and shared impromptu picnics on warm afternoons. Nina discovered that conquering her fear of the ocean had unlocked a deeper courage within. She found herself more open to new experiences, more confident speaking up at work, more relaxed in social settings. Meanwhile, Jonah saw in Nina a steadfast dedication, something he'd been yearning for in someone else and only now recognized amidst the balancing act of wave and board. The hesitant swimmer and the fearless surfer had become partners not just in the ocean's dance, but in a budding romance. Each day brought a new spark of discovery, as though the calming lullaby of the sea echoed in their hearts. They were explorers, surfers of life's uncertainties, bounding forward with trust and eagerness. They sometimes laughed about their early encounters, how Nina had barely managed to keep her head above water, and how Jonah had thought of himself as a simple surfer, never expecting that teaching someone would add such depth to his own life. Eventually, the horizon of their imaginations stretched beyond the local shoreline. They spoke of day trips to secluded coves or traveling to the remote coast, where the waves were said to be gentle but majestic. Nina wanted to push her limits further, to see how far she could travel now that she wasn't held back by fear. Jonah wanted to show her the wonders he had experienced in his years of wave chasing. For now, though, they savored the present. The sky would bloom pink at sunrise, and they'd be out there once more, carving small paths along the waves, inhaling the pure salt air. Nina would stand on her board, riding with a confidence that increased day by day, her eyes bright with the realization that fear had no hold on her anymore. And Jonah would glide beside her, heart bounding with admiration and the quiet thrill of a future uncharted. They completed each session with a soft embrace, water beating across their sun-kissed skin. When at last they trudged back onto the shore, boards tucked under their arms, they left twin footprints pressed into the sand. Footprints that soon vanished the way footprints do when the tide sweeps in. Yet in their wake remained something precious that the ocean could never wash away. Their bond remained, woven into each crest and trough of the water, as unspoken promises resonated in the hush of the wind. In that gentle push and pull, in the tender press of hands and lips, they found a new confidence not just in the sea, but in each other's embrace, an abiding courage that would guide them wherever new waves might roll.